Now that your husband is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back." Romi's words cut through the silence like shards of glass. My son Wade just smiles and nods, his eyes avoiding mine. "The house was never really yours anyway," she adds, twisting the knife. I move out without a word. "The next day I went to the bank, and I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." The dining room feels cavernous without Noel. The heavy mahogany table, usually buzzing with laughter and stories, now feels like a stage set for a tragedy. I keep glancing at his empty chair, half expecting him to materialize with his gentle smile. It's only been 1 week since we lowered my husband of 32 years into the earth. 1 week since half my soul was ripped away, leaving a gaping hole. Grief sits like a lead weight in my chest, each breath a struggle. "Pass the potatoes, Myrtle," Romy says, her voice sharp enough to shatter crystal. My daughter-in-law has never been one for warmth, but tonight a chilling indifference hangs in the air. I reach for the bowl, my hands trembling. The funeral had taken its toll, leaving me drained. At 71, I thought I was prepared for this, but nothing could have prepared me for this hollow ache. Wade, my 43-year-old son, sits between us, a silent referee who has already picked a side. He barely glances at me, his attention glued to his wife of 15 years. The son who once sought refuge in my lap during nightmares now can't meet my gaze. "The service was beautiful, wasn't it?" I offer, desperate to fill the void. "Your father would have loved seeing so many people there." Romy sets down her fork with deliberate force. "Yes, well, that's actually what we need to discuss with you, Myrtle." A knot tightens in my stomach. I look from her to Wade, searching for a flicker of empathy. Instead, I find cold calculation in her eyes and awkward avoidance in his. "What do you mean?" I ask, dread creeping in. Romy straightens, adopting her signature posture, the one she uses before dropping a bombshell. I've seen it countless times. Usually it precedes demands about Wade's visits or alterations to family traditions to suit her. "Wade and I have been talking," she begins, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Now that Noel is gone," she pauses, letting the words hang in the air. "This house is going to be too much for you to handle alone." I blink, confused. "Too much? I've managed this house for over 30 years. I know every creaky floorboard, every temperamental faucet." "Yes, that's exactly the problem," Romy continues, her pleasant facade cracking. "You're not getting any younger, and maintaining a house this size is expensive. Wade and I think it would be best if you moved somewhere more suitable." The words land like a physical blow. "Moved? This is my home. Noel and I built our life here. Wade grew up here." Wade finally speaks, his voice barely audible. "Mom, Romy's right. The upkeep alone is going to be overwhelming." "I'm not helpless, Wade," I say, my voice cracking. "And this house, your father and I saved for years to buy this place. Every room holds memories." Romy's expression hardens. "Memories don't pay utility bills or property taxes. Be practical, Myrtle." I stare at her, this woman who has systematically chipped away at my relationship with my son for 15 years. The woman who convinced Wade that Sunday dinners were too much pressure and holiday visits needed to be balanced, always tilting in her family's favor. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I ask, the answer forming like ice in my gut. "We think you should look into one of those nice senior communities," Romy says, as if bestowing a great gift. "Somewhere with activities and people your own age. It would be so much better than rattling around in this big empty house." I turn to Wade, desperately searching for a sign of dissent. "Wade, you really think I should sell the house where you grew up? Where your father and I—" "It makes sense, Mom," he interrupts, still avoiding my eyes. "And honestly, Romy and I could use the space. We've been talking about expanding our family, and this house has so much potential." His words crash over me, a tidal wave of realization. They don't just want me gone, they want my house, the home Noel and I lovingly restored, room by room, over 3 decades. Now that your father is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. Romi's voice drips with casual cruelty. The house was never really yours anyway. Wade looks up then, and for a fleeting moment I see something in his eyes. Uncertainty? Guilt? But it vanishes as quickly as it appears. He smiles and nods. She's right, Mom. This house was Dad's, and now it's mine. You were just living here. My world tilts on its axis. Just living here? As if 32 years of marriage, of building a life and raising a family, amounts to nothing more than glorified house-sitting. I see, I say quietly, my voice steadier than I feel. Inside, something is breaking. Not just my heart, but my entire understanding of my son, of my family. I stand slowly, my legs shaky. I'll need some time. 2 weeks. Romy cuts me off. That should be plenty of time to find somewhere suitable and arrange for movers. 2 weeks? Not 2 months. Not even a reasonable timeline to grieve and plan. 2 weeks to dismantle a lifetime. Wade finally looks at me, and what I see is worse than anger or hatred. It's indifference. Complete, casual indifference to my pain. It's for the best, Mom, he says as if trying to convince himself. You'll see. I walk upstairs to the bedroom I shared with Noel, each step a monumental effort. The room still smells faintly of his cologne, and his reading glasses rest on the nightstand where he left them. I sit on the edge of our bed and stare at my reflection in the dresser mirror. The woman staring back seems older than 71, her silver hair limp and her blue eyes dull with shock and grief. In 2 weeks, I have to leave this room where I said goodbye to Noel. I have to pack 32 years of marriage into boxes and surrender it all to a son who just told me I never belonged here. But as I sit in the gathering darkness, something else begins to stir beneath the grief and shock. A small, hard kernel of determination. Noel always handled the finances, but he taught me to be thorough, to pay attention to details. Tomorrow, I will start making arrangements. I will call the bank and begin the process of figuring out exactly what I'm entitled to. Because if Wade and Romy think they can erase me from this family without consequence, they are in for a surprise. The first thing I need to do is understand exactly what Noel has left behind and to whom. The morning sun feels different as I sit alone at the breakfast table, nursing my second cup of coffee. 10 days have passed since that awful dinner, and the house feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. Wade and Romy have already been by twice to assess the space, measuring rooms and discussing renovations as if I'm invisible. Yesterday, I overheard Romy on the phone with a contractor, scheduling estimates for once the old woman moves out. I've spent those 10 days in a strange bubble of numbness, mechanically sorting through belongings and trying to ignore the growing knot of anxiety. But this morning, I feel ready to face the practical matters Noel would have expected me to handle. The drive to First National Bank takes 15 minutes through the familiar streets of our neighborhood. I've made this drive countless times, usually with Noel in the passenger seat, handling our banking while I waited. He was always protective of our finances, not because he didn't trust me, but because he said it was one less thing for me to worry about. Now I wish I'd paid more attention. Mrs. Patterson, the bank manager, greets me with the careful sympathy reserved for recent widows. Mrs. Henderson, I was so sorry to hear about Noel. He was such a gentleman, always asking about my grandchildren. Thank you, Helen. He spoke fondly of you too. I settle into the chair, my purse clutched tightly in my lap. I need to understand my financial situation. Noel handled everything, and I'm rather lost. Helen's expression softens. Of course, let me pull up your accounts. She turns to her computer, her fingers clicking. After a moment, her eyebrows rise slightly. Oh my, is something wrong? My heart leaps. Have Wade and Romy already accessed our accounts? Not wrong exactly. It's just there are quite a few accounts here, more than I was expecting. Helen's voice holds a note of surprise. Let me start with the joint checking account you and Noel used for household expenses. She prints a statement and slides it across the desk. The balance is modest but comfortable. Relief floods through me. At least I won't be destitute. There's also a savings account in both your names. Another sheet appears. This balance is significantly larger, enough to sustain me for years. That's wonderful, I say, some of the tension easing. Noel was always careful about saving. Yes, he was very methodical, Helen agrees, still frowning at her screen. Mrs. Henderson, I'm seeing several other accounts here that I need to verify. Some appear to be in your name only. When was the last time you reviewed your complete financial portfolio with Noel? My name only, I echo, confused. That doesn't sound right. Noel managed everything. Helen's fingers fly over the keyboard. According to our records, there are 4 additional accounts, 2 CDs, a money market account, and, this is interesting, a trust account established 5 years ago. My head spins. I don't understand. Noel never mentioned any of this. May I ask, did your husband ever express concerns about your family situation? Sometimes clients establish separate accounts as a form of protection. The question catches me off guard. Protection from what? I'm not sure what you mean. Helen hesitates. Sometimes when clients have complex family dynamics, perhaps concerns about inheritance disputes or external pressures, they take steps to ensure their spouse's financial security. I think about Noel's behavior over the past few years, how he started asking pointed questions about Romy's spending, how he grew quiet whenever Wade mentioned their financial struggles, how he insisted on handling all the banking personally, never allowing Wade to accompany him. Can you tell me about these other accounts? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. Helen prints more pages. The first CD has been rolling over annually for 7 years. The second was opened 3 years ago. The money market account has been receiving automatic transfers from your joint checking account. Small amounts, but over time. She hands me the statements. The numbers swim before my eyes. These aren't modest emergency funds. These are substantial amounts of money, enough to buy a house, enough to live comfortably. How is this possible? I ask. I never signed anything. Actually, you did, Helen says gently, pulling a file. Your signatures are on the paperwork. It appears Noel brought you in to sign documents, probably telling you they were routine banking updates or insurance forms. I stare at the papers. There's my signature, dated and witnessed, on forms I don't remember signing. But looking at the dates, I can place some of them. The day we updated our address, the time we switched checking accounts. He never told me what I was signing, I whisper. It's not uncommon, Helen says. Some spouses prefer to handle the details to avoid causing stress or confusion, and legally, everything is above board. These accounts are legitimately yours. I try to process this. While Wade and Romy are measuring my kitchen and planning renovations, while they're treating me like a burden, I have resources they know nothing about. There's one more thing, Helen says, even more cautiously. The trust account I mentioned has been receiving transfers from a business account for the past 5 years, the Henderson Construction Trust. I believe that was your husband's company. Yes, but Noel sold the business when he retired. Wade said the money was barely enough to pay off debts. Helen consults her screen. According to our records, the business account is still active. There have been regular deposits and transfers to your trust account. Mrs. Henderson, I think you need to speak with the business accountant. There may be more to your financial picture than you realize. I leave the bank in a daze, my purse heavy with statements. Instead of driving home, I pull into a cafe parking lot and read through everything. The numbers don't lie. Somehow, without my knowledge, Noel has been systematically protecting me. Every account, every investment, every trust fund is structured to ensure my financial independence. As I study the trust statements, a pattern emerges. The deposits correspond with Wade's visits. always larger amounts after Wade asked for small loans, or when Romy hinted about their struggles. Noel was giving our son money, but protecting an equal amount for me, as if he knew I might need to stand alone. My phone buzzes with a text from Wade. "Mom, can Romy and I come by tomorrow? We want to finalize plans for the estate sale." My breath hitches. An estate sale? They've already started planning to sell off my life. I clench my fist around the phone, a new wave of resolve washing over me. They think they have me cornered, but Noel has given me a weapon they never saw coming. I decide to call the business accountant tomorrow, but as I am about to dial the number, my phone rings again. It's an unknown number. I answer, and a voice on the other end says one sentence that makes my blood run cold. "We know about the trust account, Myrtle, and we want our share. Mom, Romy found a realtor. They want to list the house. Showings start next week. I hope you find a place." I stared at the message. Then I looked at the bank statements. Wade and Romy were confident. They thought they held all the cards. They had no idea. Their plans were built on lies. Lies they didn't understand. Tomorrow, I would call the accountant. I would learn what Noel had left. Then I would decide what to do. My husband had loved me. He ensured my security. The grief was still there, fresh and sharp. But underneath, something grew. A quiet strength I hadn't felt. Morrison and Associates was in a strip mall, between a dry cleaner and a tax place. I had never been here. Noel handled meetings. "Boring paperwork," he said. "It would give me a headache." He was protecting me from more than tedium. Margaret Morrison looked my age, gray hair in a bun, kind eyes behind glasses. She handled Henderson Construction's books for over 15 years. Her expression was neutral. "Mrs. Henderson," she said. She gestured to a chair. "My condolences. Noel was a good man, an honest businessman. I'll miss our meetings." "Thank you. I wish I knew him as well." I sat down. My bank statements were in my purse. "I'm trying to understand our finances." The bank mentioned business income. Margaret's eyebrows rose. "You weren't aware? That's unusual. Noel spoke of you often. I assumed..." She trailed off. "Please, I need to understand. My son says the business was sold. It barely covered debts." "Sold?" Margaret looked confused. "Mrs. Henderson Construction wasn't sold. It was restructured." She turned to her computer. She pulled up files. 5 years ago, Noel transferred assets to a trust, the Henderson Construction Trust. You're the primary beneficiary. The room tilted. I own the construction company. The trust owns it, and you own the trust. It's been successful. Your husband was careful. Smaller jobs, reliable clients, steady income. She printed pages. Profit and loss statements for 5 years. I stared at the numbers. My hands trembled. The profits were substantial. They explained the deposits. "But Noel retired," I said. "He wasn't working. He stepped back from daily operations, but he maintained oversight, strategic decisions. Tom Bradley managed the work." I nodded. Tom worked for Noel for years. He started as an apprentice. He became foreman. He was at the funeral. He seemed grief-stricken. "Tom has been running the company for 5 years," Margaret continued. "Noel structured it so Tom gets a bonus, a percentage of the profits. It's kept him loyal. It's been successful." "Why didn't Noel tell me?" I whispered. Margaret hesitated. "Mrs. Henderson, this might be out of line. Noel was concerned about family pressures. Your son struggled. His wife had expensive tastes. Noel worried about expectations, demands that might compromise your security. The pieces fell into place. Wade asked for loans. Romy commented on our comfort. Noel calculated. He helped our son, but he protected my future." "He was protecting me," I said. "He was protecting both of you," Margaret said gently. "The loans to Wade were substantial. They came from the business account, not your personal assets. He documented everything." She pulled out another folder, copies of loan agreements. I opened the folder. My hands shook. Page after page, signed by Noel and Wade, tens of thousands of dollars, WDE's business ventures. Has Wade been making payments? I asked. Margaret looked uncomfortable. The payment schedule shows arrears. The balance is about $87,000. $87,000. The number hit me hard. Wade owed the business, my business, nearly $90,000. He claimed his father left debts. What happens to the loans now? I asked. They transfer with the business assets. You can demand payment or restructure the terms. I thought of Wade and Romy, measuring my kitchen, planning renovations, discussing showings. They were confident. They deserved everything. There's one more thing, Margaret said. Last month, your son contacted me. He said he'd take over business affairs. He asked for transfer documents. I said I needed your authorization. He seemed surprised you were involved. Wade planned to claim the business, along with the house. He assumed I was naive. The betrayal cut deep. Margaret, I need to ask something confidential. If I wanted to keep Tom as manager, would that work? Absolutely. Tom hopes to hear from you. He's concerned about the company, his job security. He'd be reliable, grateful for the opportunity. I gathered the papers. My mind reeled. The business was mine. Wade's debt was real, enforceable. Neither he nor Romy knew. Their plans were built on lies. I'd like to meet with Tom soon, I said, and understand my options regarding the loans. Of course. Shall I call Tom this afternoon? Yes, please. And Margaret, keep this confidential. Absolutely. Client confidentiality is sacred. I drove home. My phone buzzed. Another text from Romy. Myrtle, the realtor wants a photographer tomorrow. Clean and declutter the house. First impressions matter. I stared at the message. I tucked my phone away. Let them plan. Let them imagine their future. Spending money they thought they'd inherit. They had no idea. Their dreams were about to crumble. That evening, I sat in Noel's study for the first time since his death. Surrounded by his files, I understood why he was meticulous, why he insisted on documentation. He built a fortress around me, brick by brick. Tomorrow, I would learn how strong those walls were. Tom Bradley's hands wrapped around his mug. He was 55, broad shoulders, calloused palms. He spent his life building things. His eyes held weariness. Mrs. Henderson, I'll be honest, he said. His voice was rough. I've been worried sick since Mr. Noel passed. Wade came by the job site, talking about assets and streamlining. It didn't sound good for folks like me. I poured coffee. The familiar routine steadied me. Tom, what did my son tell you? He said the family had financial difficulties, tough decisions about the business. He wanted a list of contracts, equipment, cash flow. Tom's jaw tightened. He asked about the keys to the equipment yard and the office. And what did you tell him? That I needed to talk to whoever was in charge. Mr. Noel said to wait for instruction from the legal owner. Tom met my eyes. He never said it would be Wade. Relief flooded me. Noel prepared for this. Tom was a guardian, not simply handing it over. Tom, I need to share something. This stays between us. His expression grew serious. You have it, ma'am. I spread out the documents. I own Henderson Construction, not Wade, not the estate, me. Noel transferred everything to a trust 5 years ago. I'm the beneficiary. Tom's eyes widened. Well, I'll be damned. Pardon my language, ma'am. Mr. Noel was thinking ahead. He was. The business has been profitable under your management. Pride crossed Tom's face. We've built a good reputation, Mrs. Henderson. Steady clients, quality work, fair prices. Mr. Noel taught me that repeat customers are worth more. I want you to continue, I said. But I need to understand something. Wade has been less than honest. Tell me about your interactions. Tom's expression darkened. There have been several. He'd come around when Mr. Noel wasn't there, asking about cash flow, upcoming payments. He suggested the business could help him with temporary funding. And what did you tell him? That he needed to talk to his father. I'm not stupid, Mrs. Henderson. I could see what was happening. Tom's voice grew harder. Last year he showed up at the bank, the same day we deposited a big payment. Coincidence, he said, but he was mighty interested in talking to the teller about the deposit. My stomach clenched. Wade monitored the business income. He timed his requests for loans. Tom, I need complete honesty. Does Wade understand how much money flows through this business? Tom was quiet. I think he knows it's more than your family let on, but I don't think he knows the full extent. Mr. Noel was careful about keeping business and personal finances separate, on paper. What do you mean? Your husband was smart. When Wade asked for help, Mr. Noel would say the business was struggling, margins were tight, but he'd find a way to help, as a loan from the business account. Tom pulled out his notebook. I keep track of everything, Mrs. Henderson. It's a habit Mr. Noel taught me. According to my records, Wade received about $93,000 over 5 years. $93,000, even higher than what Margaret showed me. Payments, not loans. That's what I mean about Mr. Noel being smart. He'd structure them as loans, but he never enforced the terms. Wade would miss a payment. Mr. Noel would let it slide. So Wade thinks he owes nothing. Wade acts like he owes nothing, Tom corrected. Whether he believes it or pretends to believe it, I can't say. As if summoned, I heard a car door slam. Through the window, I saw Wade's Honda Pilot, parked behind Tom's truck. That's my son, I said quietly. I don't want him to know we've been talking about business matters. Tom nodded. He gathered the papers. Mrs. Henderson, whatever you decide, you have my support. Mr. Noel was a good man. He trusted you. That's good enough for me. Wade walked in without knocking, something that would have irritated Noel. Morning, Mom, he said. He barely glanced at Tom. I wasn't expecting company. Tom stopped by to check on me, I said smoothly. You know how thoughtful he's always been. Right. Wade's attention was elsewhere. He scanned the kitchen. Actually, Tom, I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about the business situation. Tom's expression was neutral. With Dad gone, there are going to be some changes. The family needs to make some practical decisions about assets and ongoing obligations. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. I assume you understand that means a full audit, Tom. We need to know exactly where we stand before. He stopped, his gaze fixed on something behind me. Mom, is that Dad's old Smith & Wesson? He gestured towards the counter, where Noel's revolver sat in plain view. Why is it out? You know how dangerous those things are. I watched this exchange with fascination. Wade was so confident, so certain of his authority. He had no idea he was trying to claim something that had never belonged to him. What kind of changes? Tom asked. Well, we'll need to evaluate whether it makes sense to continue operations, or if it would be better to liquidate assets and settle any outstanding debts. Wade's tone was casual, as if he were discussing what to have for lunch. I see. And who's making these decisions? Wade blinked, clearly not expecting the question. The family, of course. I'll be handling Dad's business affairs going forward. Will you now? Tom's voice was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight emphasis on you. Mom, you might want to make some fresh coffee, Wade said, dismissing me as he always had when important conversations were taking place. Tom and I need to discuss some technical details, but I didn't move. For the first time in years, I stood my ground. I'll stay. Thank you. This is my kitchen, and Tom is my guest. Wade looked surprised but shrugged. Fine, Tom, I'll need you to prepare a complete inventory of all equipment, vehicles, and current contracts. I'll also need access to the business accounts so I can assess the financial situation. I'd be happy to help with that, Tom said carefully. Who should I coordinate with regarding authorization for account access? With me, obviously. And you have the legal authority to access Henderson construction accounts. Tom's voice trailed off. Wade's confidence wavered slightly. Because I'm Noel Henderson's son and heir. I see. And do you have documentation showing that you're authorized to act on behalf of the business? The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the old clock above the sink. Wade's face was reddening. I could see him struggling between irritation and uncertainty. Look, Tom, I don't think you understand the situation here, Wade said, his voice taking on the condescending tone he used when he felt challenged. This isn't a hostile takeover. I'm trying to clean up Dad's affairs and make sure everyone gets taken care of, but I can't do that if you're going to make things difficult. I'm not trying to make things difficult, Tom replied evenly. I'm just trying to understand who I'm supposed to be taking orders from. Your father was very clear about proper procedures and documentation. Wade turned to me, clearly expecting support. Mom, explain to Tom that I'm handling Dad's business matters now. I looked at my son, this man who was planning to sell my house out from under me, who had accumulated nearly $90,000 in debt while claiming his father left nothing behind. And I made my choice. Actually, Wade, I think Tom is right to ask for proper documentation, I said quietly. Your father was always very careful about these things. Wade stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. What are you talking about? I'm talking about making sure everything is handled properly and legally. Surely you can understand the importance of that. For the first time since this conversation began, Wade looked uncertain. Watching that uncertainty creep across his features, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. The phone call came at 7 in the morning, 3 days after my confrontation with Wade in the kitchen. I'd been expecting it. You can't question someone's assumed authority without consequences, especially when that someone is used to getting his way. Mom, we need to talk. Now. Wade's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Romy and I are coming over. It's rather early, don't you think? This can't wait. We'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead before I could respond. I took my time getting dressed, choosing a navy blue dress that Noel had always said made me look dignified. If this was going to be a confrontation, I intended to face it properly. They arrived exactly 20 minutes later, Romy's heels clicking aggressively on the front porch. I opened the door before they could knock, maintaining the small advantage of being the hostess in my own home. Good morning, I said pleasantly, as if this were a social visit. Romy pushed past me into the living room, her designer purse clutched like a weapon. Wade followed, his face grim. They both remained standing, positioning themselves between me and the door in what I recognized as an intimidation tactic. Mom, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, Wade began. But Tom Bradley called yesterday and said he can't provide me with business information without proper authorization. What did you tell him? I settled into Noel's favorite armchair, the one with the best view of the room. I told him to follow proper procedures. Your father would have expected that. Proper procedures? Romy's voice was shrill. Wade is Noel's son and heir. What more authorization does anyone need? Legal authorization? I said calmly. The kind that comes with actual ownership. Wade's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Dad's will leaves everything to the family. I'm the executive, which means I handle all the assets until probate is settled. Actually, Wade, that's not quite accurate. I reached for the folder I'd placed on the side table, the one containing all the documents Margaret Morrison had given me. Wade and Romy both tensed as I opened it. Your father's will does indeed leave his personal possessions and this house to the family, I continued. But Henderson Construction isn't part of his estate. It hasn't been for 5 years. What are you talking about? Wade demanded. I pulled out the trust documents and set them on the coffee table between us. Henderson Construction has been owned by the Henderson Construction Trust since 2019. I am the sole beneficiary of that trust. The silence that followed was deafening. Romy reached for the documents first, her manicured fingers shaking as she scanned the legal language. Wade read over her shoulder, his face growing pale. This is impossible, Romy whispered. You don't know anything about business. You never even balanced a checkbook. You're right, I didn't. Your father handled all of that. But apparently, he understood things about our family situation that I was too naive to see. Wade sank onto the sofa as if his legs had given out. But the business was struggling. Dad always said margins were tight, that there was barely enough to keep operations running. The business has been quite profitable, actually, I said calmly. Here are the financial statements for the past 5 years. I handed him another set of papers. Watching Wade's face as he processed the numbers was like watching someone realize they'd been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. These profits. Wade's voice was barely audible. Where did this money go? Some of it went to you, Wade. Quite a lot of it, actually. I pulled out the loan documentation. $87,000 over 5 years, to be precise. Romy grabbed the loan papers, her eyes scanning frantically. These say loans, Wade. You told me those were gifts. You said your father was helping us get established. They were gifts, Wade said, but his voice lacked conviction. Dad never asked for payments. He never even mentioned payment schedules. Actually, he did, I said quietly. Margaret Morrison has copies of every conversation, every missed payment, every time your father chose to extend the terms rather than demand what you owed. I watched as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Wade had built his financial life on the assumption that his father's generosity would continue indefinitely. He'd probably borrowed against those expectations, made commitments based on money he thought was his. But this doesn't change anything, Romy said suddenly, her voice taking on a desperate edge. The house still goes to Wade. That's worth more than some little construction business. Is it? I asked mildly. Romy's eyes flashed with something between anger and panic. Don't play games, Myrtle. This house is worth at least $400,000. You're right. It's a lovely property. Of course, there is the matter of the mortgage. Wade looked up sharply. What mortgage? Dad said the house was paid off. It was, but 18 months ago, your father took out a home equity loan. Quite a substantial one, actually. I pulled out the final set of documents, the ones I discovered in Noel's study just yesterday, filed carefully in a folder marked Emergency Funds. A home equity loan for $350,000, I continued. The proceeds were transferred into the Henderson Construction Trust account, which means they became part of my inheritance. Romy's face went white. That's not possible. We would have known. We would have had to sign. Your father was the sole owner of the house at the time, I interrupted. I was listed as a spouse with rights of survivorship, but not as a co-owner. He didn't need anyone else's signature. Wade stared at the loan documents like they were written in a foreign language. But why would he do this? Why would he mortgage the house just to put money in a business account? For the first time since this conversation began, I allowed my carefully controlled emotions to show. Because he was protecting me, Wade. My voice cracked. He was making sure that no matter what happened, I would have financial security. Protecting you from what? Wade's voice was hoarse. From this, I said, gesturing to the scene in front of me. From being thrown out of my own home by family members who saw me as a burden instead of a person. From being left with nothing while everyone else claimed what they thought they deserved. Romy's composure finally cracked completely. You manipulated him. You convinced a dying man to change everything. Your father wasn't dying when he set up these trusts, Romy. He was planning. And the fact that he felt the need to plan for this scenario should tell you something about how he viewed our family dynamics. Wade's hands were shaking as he set down the papers. Mom, surely we can work something out. You don't really want to run a construction business in the house. This house is our family home. It should stay in the family. It is staying in the family, Wade. It's staying with me. But the mortgage payments, Romy said desperately. How will you afford the mortgage payments? The same way your father intended, with income from Henderson Construction. Tom Bradley assures me the business is quite stable, and Margaret Morrison says the cash flow will easily cover the loan payments with plenty left over for my living expenses. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Now, I believe you mentioned something about moving out. I think that's still an excellent idea. Not for me, of course, but I'm sure you'll find somewhere lovely to start fresh. Wade looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Mom, you can't be serious. After everything Dad did for you, everything our family means. Your father did do everything for me, I interrupted. He loved me enough to make sure I'd never be at anyone's mercy, including my own son's. And now I understand just how much I needed that protection. Romy was already at the door, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. This isn't over, Myrtle. We'll fight this. We'll contest everything. You're welcome to try, I said calmly. But you should know that everything your father did was completely legal and properly documented. Margaret Morrison is very thorough, and she's already provided copies of all relevant documents to my attorney. Wade paused at the door, his expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. I don't understand, Mom. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you, Wade. I'm simply refusing to let you do it to me. After they left, I sat alone in the sudden quiet of my house, and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. For the first time since I was a young woman, I was completely financially independent. I owed nothing to anyone, and no one could take away what I had. Noel had given me more than money. He'd given me freedom. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my new oceanfront cottage, watching the morning sun paint golden streaks across the Pacific. The sound of waves against the rocks below had become my daily symphony, replacing the familiar creaks and settling sounds of the old house. The cottage in Mendocino was smaller than the family home, but it was entirely mine. Every piece of furniture, every decorative choice, every room reflected my taste, rather than compromises made over 32 years of marriage. I discovered, to my surprise, that I had excellent taste when nobody else was offering opinions. Henderson Construction continued to thrive under Tom Bradley's management. He called every Friday afternoon to update me on current projects and upcoming contracts, and quarterly profits were deposited directly into my account. I'd kept my promise to maintain the business exactly as Noel had structured it, and everyone involved seemed happier for the stability. The cottage had been an unexpected discovery. While researching properties in coastal California, I'd learned that Noel had purchased it 3 years ago through the construction trust. Margaret Morrison had found the deed while organizing business assets, along with a note in Noel's handwriting for Myrtle's retirement when she's ready for ocean air and no schedule but her own. Even in death, my husband was still taking care of me. This morning was special, though. My lawyer was coming by to finalize the last piece of business from my old life. Wade and Romy had indeed tried to contest the trust arrangements, hiring an expensive attorney who specialized in elder law and financial exploitation cases. It hadn't gone well for them. The investigation had revealed that not only were all of Noel's financial arrangements completely legal and properly executed, but Wade's debt to the business was actually larger than anyone had initially calculated. Interest and penalties brought the total to just over $96,000. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. James Patterson, no relation to Helen from the bank, was a precise man who believed punctuality reflected character. He'd been representing me since this whole mess began, and his calm competence had been invaluable during the more stressful moments. "Good morning, Myrtle," he said, settling into the comfortable chair by the window that had become his usual spot during our meetings. "I have the final settlement agreement for your review." I poured coffee from the French press I'd learned to use, another small freedom in my new life, and sat across from him. "How did they take the final terms?" James's expression suggested controlled amusement. "About as well as you'd expect. Wade's attorney spent considerable time arguing that family obligations should supersede business contracts, but ultimately the law is quite clear on debt obligations. He handed me the settlement documents. I picked them up, but before I could read a word, James cleared his throat. "There's something else, Myrtle." After 6 months of legal battles, Wade and Romy agreed. The terms acknowledged the full debt. A payment plan stretched out over 8 years. That was if they never missed a payment. They begged for a family forgiveness clause. James stood firm. Wade even cried in the final meeting, James reported. He claimed you were ruining your relationship with your only son over money. I felt a pang, but only a small one. And what did you say? I asked. James adjusted his tie. I reminded them I represented your financial interests, not family relationships, though I might have mentioned most mothers don't sue their children to collect debts. He paused, a glint in his eye. The settlement included a provision that pleased me. If Wade and Romy defaulted, the business could garnish WDE's wages. We could place liens on any property they purchased. A safety net, securing what was owed, regardless of their future. James produced another envelope. One more thing, Myrtle. He handed it to me. My name was written in Wade's familiar scrawl. Inside, a brief note. Plain paper. Mom, it began. I know you probably won't forgive me for this fight, but I finally understand what Dad was doing. It took losing almost everything to see how much I took for granted. Romy and I are in marriage counseling. I'm working 2 jobs to meet the payment schedule. I hope someday you'll talk to me again. I'm sorry for everything. Wade. I folded the letter. I set it aside. The apology felt real, but it was 6 months too late. Motivated by consequences, not conscience. Any response you want me to convey? James asked. No, I said. If Wade wants to rebuild a relationship, he can do it the same way he'll pay off his debt. Gradually, consistently, over time. James nodded. He gathered his things. He left. I took my coffee to the deck. I reread Wade's letter. The grief lingered, not just for Noel, but for the son I thought I'd raised. The family I believed was real. Underneath the sadness, something stronger bloomed. A deep satisfaction. I stood up for myself. It mattered. My phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. It seemed familiar somehow. I answered. Hello? Mrs. Henderson, this is Linda Morrison, Margaret's daughter. I hope you don't mind me calling. Linda, the nurse. Margaret mentioned her often. Of course not, dear. How can I help you? Well, it's about how you might help us. Mom told me about your situation, rebuilding your life after family difficulties. I'm starting a support group for women who've dealt with financial manipulation by family. I wondered if you'd share your experience. The request surprised me. I'm not sure I'd know what to say. You'd be surprised how many women are in similar situations. Adult children who feel entitled, spouses who hide finances, family who mistake kindness for weakness. Your story could help them understand their rights, find courage to protect themselves. I looked at the bay. A pelican dove for a fish. 6 months ago, I was a grieving widow, facing homelessness at the hands of my own son. Today, I was financially independent, living where I wanted, accountable to no one. When would you like me to speak? I asked. Really? You'll do it? Linda sounded relieved. I think I will, but not about revenge or legal battles. I want to talk about the difference between being a loving family member and a doormat, about understanding your finances, about the gift Noel gave me, protecting my future, even from our own son. We set a date for the following month. After hanging up, I felt a sense of purpose. Helping other women felt right. Honoring Noel's protection, my hard-won independence. That evening, I did my nightly ritual. I sat on the deck with wine. I watched the sunset. I appreciated the simple truth. This view, this peace, this freedom, it was all mine. No one could take it. No one could vote me out of my own life. No one could decide I was disposable. The cottage was quiet, only the ocean's rhythm, the distant seabirds calling. Tomorrow, I'd tend my garden, drive to town for lunch. The owner saved me the window table. Simple pleasures, belonging only to me. Wade's debt would be paid, whether he managed it or the business garnished his wages. The settlement ensured justice, regardless of his choices. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was the strength to demand respect. The last light faded. I raised my glass to Noel. He loved me enough to protect me, never helpless, never dependent on those who saw me as expendable. He loved me enough to ensure I had what I needed. When the test came, I passed. The ocean whispered to the shore. I sat on my deck, in my home, living my life, finally understanding freedom, never begging for a place at a table, mine by right. It meant peace. Now, I'm curious, what would you do in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? But as the night deepened, a heavy fog rolled in from the sea, blanketing everything in an eerie silence. And then, a single knock echoed from the front door, a knock I hadn't heard in over a year, a knock that sent a shiver down my spine because I knew, somehow, who was standing on the other side.